There are two ways of dealing with checked exceptions. First, we'll look at how to handle exceptions using the throws keyword. When a method possibly throws a checked exception, you can indicate this in the signature. This way, you don't need to deal with the exception in more detail. This will have to be done by the code that calls the method. Indicating that the method might throw an exception is done with the throws keyword. If a method signature indicates that the method might throw a checked exception, the calling code needs to deal with this. That means that it must either handle the exception within the method using a try-catch block, or also declare the exception in a method signature using a throws clause and leaving it to their calling code. Let's have a look at an example in IntelliJ. So I already mentioned that we did not really need the throws clause on line 4 for the arithmetic exception, and that is because it is a runtime exception. But instead, if for now, and this is definitely not a good practice, we would instead throw a IO exception. An IO exception is a checked exception, so our code is going to give an error. If I hover over this, you can see it. It says unhandled exception. And then we have options. We could either work with a try-catch, or we could add the exception to the method signature. And we do that by specifying throws and then the type of the exception. And as you can see, it's all good right now. It's a good practice to be so precise as possible, so don't specify exception here, because this way you allow all exceptions to be undealt with. So really only specify the ones that you need to have any throws clause. So right now, if we would not have the throws exception here, our calling code would have a problem. Let me hover over it to show you. It says unhandled exception. Because I'm throwing a checked exception, the compiler can now tell that the method may throw an exception. And therefore, I have two options. You can guess them probably by now, try-catch or add it to the method signature. And I'm going to go for this last option. Alright, let's have a look at another example. So this time, I'm going to work with a file. So I'm going to say file, and of course I'll import file. It's coming from the Java IO package. And I'm just going to say equals new file. And that's going to be sample.txt. So right now, if I'm going to use this file in a file reader, I'm going to get an error when I don't have any exception handling in place. And this is because the file reader may throw the file not found exception. So I could either work with try-catch, but this time I'm going to do again add exception to method signature. And as you can see, my code will compile right now. And I can run this, and you'll actually see that we'll simply throw the exception and no real handling is happening here, because the file is not found. We don't handle the exception, we only declare that it might throw the checked exception. And this way it will be propagated to the caller of the method. And the caller of the method must handle it or declare it using the throws keyword. In this situation, we're calling it from the main. And as you can see, it's going to throw the file not found exception because it doesn't anywhere on its way come across a proper handling method. So this is why we get this method as we get it, and our program is going to stop. As you can see, this is a terrible practice because our program stopped running and it crashed. We could have used a better way to deal with the exception. Please mind that you can also throw unchecked exceptions, but the rules are somewhat different. Since it's unchecked, it doesn't need to be handled, and since it's unchecked, the code doesn't necessarily need to be able to throw it either. Using throws should only be done if you can't specify how to deal with the exception on that level. So it's time we're going to have a look at how to handle exceptions using the try-catch block.